My name is Zanzile Isoke, and I am the chair of Gender, Women, and Sexuality Studies at the University of Minnesota. You have, joined us for the, the first in a series of talks that are kind of circled around the theme Black people healing for justice and liberation, fierce resolve in times of crisis. Before we get started with the introductions, I would like to give a brief land acknowledgement. We live and we all reside, regardless if we're in the United States, where we are in the US, if this is a US based, we live on the ancestral homelands of Indigenous people. And here in Minnesota, those are the ancestral homelands of the Anishinaabe people, including the Lakota, La Dakota, and the Ojibwe. I want to honor each and every one of you who chose to be present. I also want to honor those who we have lost from COVID-19, from political violence, from white supremacy, from domestic and interpersonal violence, and especially for those as well who have lives have been lost as a result of the unchecked circulation of guns in our communities. At the same time, I would like to invite you to remember your ancestors, all of our ancestors who have struggled and sacrificed and died for us and loved us when the world would not and could not. And we also want to remember those who live for us and who love us right now. So all are welcomed here. At this time, I want to talk a little bit more about the series. This is a series that features Black healing justice writers, practitioners, and very importantly as well, community organizers. This lecture series will explore basic themes that are central to our survival, as particularly for Black people on this planet. And these include Black feminist and queer praxis and healing modalities to care for the mind, body, and spirit in times of crisis. Thinking about how Black, queer, and feminist people have created mindfulness practices to resist anti-Blackness in our personal, interpersonal, professional, and academic lives. We're also interested in exploring how community somatics can restore resilience and resolve in a culture of denial, fear, ambition, greed, and willful ignorance. This series is made possible by quite a few co-sponsors, especially the earlier ones who I want to thank. But I want to really give a shout out to Race, Indigeneity, Sexuality Initiative, which we call RIGS, the Department of American Studies, the Department of African American and African Studies, the Office of Public Engagement, the Department of Chicano and Latino Studies, the Black Faculty and Staff Association, and also uniquely the Hammer Center for Health and Wellness BIPOC Initiative at Macalester College, which under the leadership of Dana Suttles. Just so you know, our next colloquium will take place on March 5th with Dr. Joy Lewis, and it is going to be a really phenomenal talk. So I hope you guys will join us next month. And before we begin, I just want to really thank our staff, especially Liz Johnson and Casey Kinney. Both of them have assisted with publicity, designing and promoting the promotional materials, and just helping to set up for this day. And this is made possible for their hard work and their patience with me as well. Just so you all know, in addition to Ayo Yetunde, who will be introduced by Jessica Horvath Williams, we also have Shannon Gibney joining us as a conversant today, or as a discussant. Shannon Gibney is a writer, educator, activist, and author of See No Color and Dream Country. Both are young adult novels and one won the Minnesota Book Award in 2016 and 19. both won Minnesota Book Awards in 2016 and then in 2019. Gibney is faculty in English at Minneapolis College, where she teaches writing. And she has been part of the Common Ground Meditation Center and other BIPOC sanghas or communities in the Twin Cities for 15 years. At this point, I would like to introduce Jessica Horvath Williams. And Jessica is going to do the honor of introducing Ayo Yetunde. Jessica, can you wave your hand? So Jessica Horvath Williams joins us this year as a Presidential Postdoc Fellow in Gender, Women, and Sexuality Studies at the University of Minnesota. Jessica serves as co-chair of the Critical Disability Studies Collective and on the executive board of the Autistic Women Non-Binary Work Network, and as a healthcare activist educator here in the Twin Cities. We are so fortunate in our department to have Jessica with us. She teaches and researches at the intersection of feminist disability studies and 19th century US history and literature. And her current project revisits the history of disability, tracing many of its key ideologies through ideal womanhood, racial capitalism, and unwaged labor. Unwaged labor. And so I want to invite Jessica right now to kind of introduce herself to the community, as well as introduce our keynote speaker for today, Dr. Pamela Ayo Yetunde.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Zinzile, for that introduction. I really appreciate it, and I'm really excited to be here today, and I'm excited for this talk. So it is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Yetunde. Pamela Ayo Yetunde, who has a JD and a THD, is the co-editor of Black and Buddhist, What Buddhism Can Teach Us About Race, Resilience, Transformation, and Freedom, Buddhist Christian Dialogue, US Law, and Womanist Theology for Transgender Spiritual Care, and Object Relations, Buddhism and Relationality, and Womanist Practical Theory. She's the co-founder of Center of the Heart, and I'll drop the link for that organization in the chat as soon as I'm done with this introduction. And she's also the founder of Audrey, Spiritual Care for Women with Cancer. Dr. Yetunde is a community Dharma leader trained at Spirit Rock Meditation, and Ayo also works as a pastoral counselor and chaplain. So, without further ado, Dr. Yetunde.
Thank you, Jessica. Thank you, Zinzile. I want to begin by saying I'm really overwhelmed. I see so many friends here today from so many places: Atlanta, San Francisco Bay Area, Twin Cities, Minnesota. I mean, really, and I'm really on the verge of tears because my friends here right now have really loved me. I've been angry a lot, the last year, but my friends have helped sustain me and keep me sane. So thank you for your love. And yeah, I want to point out one thing about Zinzile. Zinzile, in case any of you don't know Zinzile is a very strong person, a very strong and compassionate and outspoken person, actually an exemplar and epitome of what I'm going to talk about today. When I moved from Blacklanta to Minnesota, Zinzile told me in front of, we were the only two Black women in the group, white people. She didn't ask for permission to say what she needed to say. She didn't check around the circle to see if it was going to be okay for her to just connect with me as a Black woman and tell me what it was that I would need to do to survive living in the Twin Cities. And I just thought that was remarkable. And Sinzile, you know, I've told you this over and over again. I'm going to tell you again how much I appreciate you. Yeah, thank you. And I love you all. And those of you who I haven't met yet, maybe we'll meet today. And that would be a blessing and a joy for me. So I much prefer just talking like this. However, I don't want to disappoint my scholar sisters in Zile. So I did prepare some remarks. I'm going to read them. Please bear with me as I do. And then my other sister friend, Shannon, and I will be in conversation with one another. So I wanted to title this talk Call and Response because I've been concerned for the last 5 years about how we're breaking apart from one another. And with all the injustices that we have experienced lately, we know that it's going to take us being in relationship with one another to bring about a better society for ourselves. So Call and Response, a Womanist Buddhist Vision for Relational Justice Making, I hope will be an invitation for us to continue the work that we're already doing together. And if you've been feeling alienated living in this situation we're in right now, to invite you into a deeper relationship. But first of all, I want to say I'm in Chicago now, and I'm in the city of Mayor Lori Lightfoot, right? So from Chicago to Minneapolis, the city of your former mayor, Sharon Sales Belton, who was the mayor in 1994 to 2000, a trailblazer herself. I just want to say, let's connect on that level. We are in cities that are led by Black women, and we are learning a lot from them. If you're not in these cities, Chicago, Minneapolis, that's cool. Greetings to everybody. So I'm going to tell you some things about myself that Jessica did not tell you because I didn't tell her, or them. I'm sorry, I don't know your pronouns. But these are the things that I'm bringing to our conversation. And I'm also going to ask you to reflect a little bit on what you're bringing to this conversation as well. So as you can tell, I am Black. I do identify as a woman. I'm a Black woman who was born in segregated Indianapolis, Indiana in 1961. And I grew up in the United Methodist Church, went to church every Sunday. I was bused to all white schools for 6th grade and in high school. On the first day in 6th grade, our bus was met at the school by an angry mob of white parents. Fast forward, in 1985, I was introduced to Audre Lorde's writings. I graduated from law school in 1992 in Indiana, where there were only 5 Black people in our class. My first job out of law school was as an Immigration and Naturalization Service political asylum officer. And in that position, I heard countless stories about the heinous ways we meaning human beings throughout the world, perpetuate human rights abuses. I also want to mention that I worked for a brief time in politics. That's one of the reasons why I went to law school. But in that position, I saw how people sold their souls, literally selling their highest values just to be in proximity to elected officials. I began practicing Buddhism about 20 years ago, and I encountered womanist theology sometime between 2011 and 2015, right around the same time I encountered object relations theory, which I'll discuss a little more later. And now, presently, I am committed to using Audre Lorde's work in my work. So I reflect on these experiences because I also want you to reflect on your experiences. So let's take a little time to do that right now. I'm going to ask you some questions for your reflection. When were you born? Where did you grow up? When, if ever, did you encounter an angry mob of people gathered against you and people who look like you in order for them to maintain white power, privilege, and access? What have you come to believe about your own power? What have you done, and what do you do to empower yourself? Who inspires you? And lastly, for now, how do you sense danger? And let's just take a couple minutes and reflect. Thank you. So I want to return to the subject of sensing danger. Within just a few days, another impeachment sentencing trial will begin. And the stakes are high for all groups that have been targeted by the previous administration. Very high. 1 month ago, an insurrection took place. Insurrection is defined as an act or an instance of revolting, especially violently, against civil or political authority or against an established government. If justice is served, Donald J. Trump will be charged with inciting an insurrection. I claim that a womanist perspective, one that is informed by Black women's knowing and informed by Buddhism, valuing seeing things as they really are, the combination of those things actually prevents me from putting my faith in the US Senate serving justice. But I hope I'm wrong. I do hope I'm wrong. But here's why I don't have faith in this particular particular grouping of senators. You may recall not so long ago in September that then Attorney General William Barr suggested to federal prosecutors that they should consider charging Black Lives Matter activists with sedition, which basically is another word for insurrection. Before William Barr, there was Jeff Sessions, the Attorney General who led the zero tolerance policy that led to border guards separating children from their parents and housing those children in cages with no plan for reunification. Let us not ever forget how Black and brown bodies have been uber criminalized, brutalized, and politicized as seditious these past 4+ years. The Trump effect, I call it the Trump effect, blaming other people for the Trump administration's own misdeeds, has permeated, I say infected, a significant part of the legislative branch. If Trump is acquitted, who do you think will be the guilty ones? I think the guilty ones will be all those who denied Trump a second term. And that includes me. It's twisted like this. When the police shot into Breonna Taylor's apartment and killed her while she was asleep, who was blamed for the murder? Police blamed her boyfriend because he shot his gun at the police barging into the apartment with a no-knock warrant. In self-defense, he was blamed for the police killing of his girlfriend. This is twisted. This is gaslighting. And this is what we've been served the last 4+ years. And it's here. Given this mentality, what message do you think an acquittal will send to the tens of thousands of people gathered at the Capitol on January 6th? In order to form a more perfect union, if that's what we want to do, we need to sense the danger before us. And we need to sense it better than I think we have. I think those with a womanist sensibility are conditioned to sense danger and prepare accordingly. Now, there are many parts to the definition of womanist. I'm going to say today that a womanist, in short, coming out of the culture of Black women, appreciates women's strength and is committed to survival and wholeness of entire people. So today I'd like to lift up some, certainly not all, but some Black women political leaders who have wrestled with the outgoing administration. And I'm focusing mostly on the mayors, but I want to start with Georgia's voting rights activist, founder of the organization Fair Fight, and the past gubernatorial aspirant, maybe future gubernatorial aspirant, Stacey Abrams. Stacey Abrams is strong and she is persistent. She believes all people should have the right to have their vote counted. The call there has been voter suppression. The response is fair fight. DC Mayor Muriel Bowser, strong and graceful in the line of the direct line of White House fire, making a place for Black Lives Matters activists and securing people from terrorism. The call there is self-determination. It's always been statehood, but also self-determination. And the response is creating refuge. San Francisco Mayor London Breed is strong and compassionate. Quote, "I don't care if you are a Black mayor or not," Breed tells Vogue magazine. "If you see what's happening to Black people in comparison to any other race in San Francisco, and you aren't making deliberate investments that will change the outcome, then why even be in this position?" she asked. The call is poverty, and the response is investment. New Orleans Mayor LaToya Cantrell is strong and equity-oriented. She said, "The most Afrocentric city in the United States of America is the city of New Orleans." And she continued, "And that is why we're doing this work, the work of improving minority business contract access." That's the work. We are doing this work to ensure that everyone has their fair shake and opportunity in this city. The call there is exclusion, and the response is inclusion. US Vice President Kamala Harris, strong and courageous. She said, "I may be the first woman vice president, but I won't be the last." And her celebration of Howard University and Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated is quite remarkable. The call is the suffering of toxic white patriarchal governmental oppression. The response is fierce courage to call a predator a predator. Atlanta Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms said at the Democratic National Convention, "So let's stand up for our children, our children's children, and for this great democracy that our ancestors worked to build. And let's vote. And let's organize to get others to vote with us. You can help make this happen. We know how important it is that we elect real servant leaders, Leaders like Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, people of honor and integrity, who hold justice close to their hearts and believe that the lives of my 4 Black children matter. In the words of womanist Audre Lorde, your silence will not protect you. The call is doubt in our own power, and the response is an invitation into faith and valuing life. Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot is strong and blunt. She denounced Trump over a tweet he sent one morning condemning demonstrators in Minneapolis who were voicing their anger over the police killing of another unarmed Black man, George Floyd, warning that he would send National Guards to the city and that when the looting starts, the shooting starts. You may remember that. And so her response was, let me say one other thing. Donald Trump's comment last night was profoundly dangerous, and we must stand in firm solidarity and say this is totally unacceptable, no matter who is the speaker. His goal is to polarize and destabilize local government and to inflame racist urges. And we can absolutely not let him prevail. And I will code what I really want to say to Donald Trump. It's 2 words. It begins with F and it begins with you, she added. She said what so many people wanted to say but didn't dare say. The call was for respecting boundaries, and the response was meeting power with power. Charlotte Mayor Vi Lyles, strong and compassionate, signed a proclamation declaring racism a public health crisis. Can you imagine? Racism is a public health crisis that should be treated with urgency. The proclamation commits to promote racial equity through Charlotte City Council policy. The call was for a dignified existence. The response was policy oriented. Rochester, New York's Lovely Warren, strong and decisive. She immediately removed police officers from their positions after their involvement in the asphyxiation of unarmed Black man Daniel Prude. The call was justice. The response was decisive. Baton Rouge's Mayor Sharon Weston Broome, strong and inclusive. She signed an executive order to establish, She signed an executive order to establish the Mayor's Commission on Racial Equity and Inclusion. The call was for leadership. The response was to lead. Strong, persistent, graceful, compassionate, equity-oriented, courageous, womanist-oriented, blunt, inclusive, and decisive. And I also want to add very vulnerable, very vulnerable, very vulnerable to anxiety, depression, trauma, and post-traumatic stress, as well as still being vulnerable to deadly attack. How will we have their backs in this era of danger, I wonder? So, and I wonder, not just for you, but I wonder for myself, on my behalf, as I think about how I want to live in these dangerous times, supporting these leaders. Our commitment through the organization I work with, Center of the Heart, is to make a healing space for these women. And as citizens, I wonder how we will respond to what I hear from many, not all, but from many, as the call for democracy in the midst of what may be the greatest attack on US democracy. I believe this will be the greatest attack on US democracy if the US Senate acquits the president of incitement of insurrection. Strength, persistence, gracefulness, compassion, fairness, fierceness, womanist-oriented, blunt, inclusive, and vulnerability. When all these are cultivated for the good of the whole, This is how personal power is made. Personal constructive power. And as we sense danger, which I think we need to do, and we can sense it through the experiences of Black women, political leaders who are on the ground, we can do this while also cultivating power. Power can be cultivated even in our fear. So here are 4 ways that I think one can cultivate constructive personal power. And so, so I'm a community Dharma leader. And basically what that means is, sometimes I teach things about Buddhism, but most of my work is in pastoral counseling. And so I look at how people utilize their spiritual lives for resilience, let's say. So these 4 things come out of a variety of experiences, professional and vocational experiences. One way to build constructive personal power is to build an altar at home. Have an altar at home. And on that altar, put objects that represent constructive power. I mentioned earlier that I learned about object relations theory, which is a psychoanalytical theory that I use sometimes in pastoral counseling. In short, object relations theory is about how our internal ego structures are created and how those structures inform our understanding of ourselves in relationship to external objects. And it also helps explain the psychological process of objectification. So on your altar, place objects, photos, or other images that represent constructive power. And on a regular basis, sit or stand before that altar with those objects and breathe in the energy of power. Just breathe in the energy of power. You might even want to hold it just so that you can feel the tingling throughout your body. And then before you exhale, imagine that you are using your power for the survival and wholeness of entire people. See if you can feel the energy of power course through your body and imagine that you as a manifestation of energy can use yourself to effectuate positive change. So that's one thing. 2, craft an invocation and recite it when needed. It seems to me that Mayor Lance Bottoms, when she was quoting Audre Lorde, she wasn't just quoting her, which, by the way, took me by complete positive surprise. I don't know if anyone has ever quoted Audre Lorde at a Democratic National Convention. I'm pretty sure not at a Republican National Convention. But in any case, really caught me by surprise in a positive way. And so she used the quote, "Your silence will not protect you." But I think it wasn't just a quote. I really think she was invoking the spirit of Audre Lorde. This quote, "Your silence will not protect you," which I think appears in many places, but it also comes from Lorde's essay, The Transformation of Silence into Language and Action. She first gave this lecture in 1977 at the Modern Language Association's Lesbian and Literature panel. And now I'd like to read some portions from this essay. And I want you to, if you haven't read this, please, 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 I beg you. If I have to dare you, I dare you to read it. I dare you to read it and leave reading this the same as you started when you started reading it. It should inspire some change, internal change in you. So the transformation of silence into language and action. And I'm going to skip to different parts in the essay. But she starts, "I have come to believe over and over again that what is most important to me must be spoken, made verbal and shared, even at the risk of having it bruised or misunderstood. That the speaking profits me beyond any other effect. I am standing here as a Black lesbian poet, and the meaning of all that waits upon the fact that I am still alive and might not have been." She's talking about her first cancer diagnosis. In becoming forcibly and essentially aware of my mortality and of what I wished and wanted for my life, however short it might be, priorities and omissions became strongly etched in a merciless light. And what I most regretted were my silences. Of what had I ever been afraid? To question or to speak as I believed could have meant pain or death. But we all hurt in so many different ways all the time, and pain will either change or end. Death, on the other hand, is the final silence. And here she's talking about some of the women who supported her during her cancer treatment. They all gave me a strength and concern without which I could not have survived intact. Within those weeks of acute fear came the knowledge. Within the war we are all waging with the forces of death, subtle and otherwise, conscious or not, I am not only a casualty, I am also a warrior. Skipping ahead, she writes, and of course I am afraid, because the transformation of silence into language and action is an act of self-revelation. And that always seems fraught with danger. But my daughter, when I told her of our topic and my difficulty with it, said, tell them about how you're never really a whole person if you remain silent, because there's always that one little piece inside you that wants to be spoken out. And if you keep ignoring it, it gets madder and madder and hotter and hotter. And if you don't speak it out, one day it will just up and punch you in the mouth from the inside. I don't think any of us want to be punched in the mouth from the inside from our silence. And now continues to be the time to speak. So rereading the transformation of silence into language and action, I decided, and my colleagues at Center of the Heart decided, that we're going to form some of our upcoming yoga retreats just around this powerful essay. I just read portions of it, but almost every paragraph could be turned into a retreat. That's how powerful it is. So, cultivating personal power can include having an altar with objects representing constructive power, crafting and using an invocation, and then 3, visualizing ancestors that have persevered. That's really important. Everyone, I believe everyone has an ancestor who has made it through something horrendous. Even if you can't locate a blood ancestor who's made it through something horrendous, you can adopt as many resilient ancestors as you want. When visualizing these ancestors, begin by relaxing your mind and your body. Then bring an image of that ancestor to mind. Allow your beliefs about their thoughts, abilities, their work, personality, etc., to permeate your consciousness, and feel that consciousness throughout your body. Imagine yourself merging with their spiritual essence. And then come back to yourself, but also with the inspiration of their perseverance. And 4, identify and release self-limiting beliefs about yourself. So I want to go back and ask you if you remember President Barack Obama's campaign slogan, "Yes, we can." You remember that? So simple and so powerful. And think about it. Many of us didn't think, of course I did because I called it right away, but that's another story. Many of us in this country didn't think it was possible to elect a Black man to be president of the United States. And the slogan was, "Yes, we can." Yes, We can. Yes, we can. Yes, we can was the slogan, the mantra, the rally cry. Each word, yes, opening, we, relational, can, agency. So adopt a mantra like that for yourself. It can be, yes, I can, or yes, I'm willing, or yes, I'll try. But whatever you choose, begin it with yes for the opening, for the opening. So imagine bringing together pictures of Abrams, and you can find these online. I couldn't find one that was really good, but you can find them online. Imagine bringing pictures together of Abrams, Bowser, Breed, Cantrell, Harris, Lance Bottoms, Lightfoot, Lyles, Warren, and Weston Broom to your altar and to your consciousness. Just imagine. Your consciousness is filled with the leadership and the dedicated service of Black women serving on the ground. There's someone on our call today. I won't name the name, but I'll say he is a white man and he has a Black woman on his altar. Imagine what your invocation might be. Imagine what your invocation might be. And if and when you experience resistance to experiencing your power, because you'll feel it, you will feel it, and it might scare you. Recall your mantra. Yes, 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 I am willing. I'm willing. Yes, I'll try. Yes, I can. I am committed to, and then after you do that, so yes, I am. Yes, I can. Yes, I'm willing. Then add, try it on until it's real for you. I am committed to the wellness and wholeness of us all. And then you might want to end your practice with a closing, like a prayer for yourself, a blessing for yourself, a well wish for yourself. May I be strong, persistent, graceful, compassionate, fair, courageous, womanist oriented, blunt when I need to be. I know that's hard for Minnesotans, but that's another story too. Blunt, inclusive, and decisive, and not deny my vulnerability. And because I am vulnerable, may I allow myself to be cared for as I listen for the call and respond. Thank you for listening.
We can unmute and clap. I think we can be present.
Woo, woo.
Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ayo.
Yep.
And so now we're going to turn it over to Professor Shannon Gibney for the response. And then from there, we'll open up for question and answer.
Thank you so much, Ayo. There's so much to dig into here. I was actually taking furious notes while you were talking. You know, of course, the desire to not miss anything is impossible. But there's so many places that I want to follow up, both individually with my own practice, certainly the invitation to create a personal altar. That's something that I have never done. I've thought about it many times, but the way that you break it down, I think is both simple and empowering for folks. So I really appreciate that. And I've sort of started with little pieces of an altar, but now I feel I've been inspired from your talk to really commit to that. So thank you. There's a few places I want to kind of follow up and clarify. And you and I have talked about how we're both blunt. We both have, that's why we get along. We both have critical minds. And so, yeah, I hope you take these questions in the spirit that they are intended, which is just, okay, all right, we're on the same page. So these, and again, these are things, there might not necessarily be an Ayo Yetunde answer to this. This might just be a tension in this framework of womanist, Buddhist justice making that is not going to be resolved, and that's fine too. But I just want to get your thoughts and your feelings. One big thing for me, the focus of the talk was on electoral politics, right? But what about this argument that, I hear a lot, particularly in BIPOC communities, that, it's really grassroots movement and organizing, which in many ways that's harder to locate, and to support, because it's so fluid and because it sort of is under the radar of these more kind of like dominant frameworks than electoral politics, that these grassroots movements are what actually catalyzes real change. And that, the sort of like winner take all electoral politics, combined with sort of this, capitalism and whatnot, that should not actually be the focus of, or the main focus of our efforts for transformative societal change. How would you respond to that?
I guess first I will say that when anyone gives a 20-minute talk, they're not going to cover everything that everybody believes, right? That's first thing. Everything that's written, everything that's said is a slice of the whole reality, and I think should only be taken as such. That's why academics should say in their writings what the limits of their research is, right? It used to be researchers would write and say, this is the truth for all eternity, it's universal, right? And from a womanist perspective, one of the things I really love about womanist scholars is like, look, I'm speaking from my perspective only. I'm not trying to say this is a universal concept or that it applies to everybody. It's from our perspective for us. So I would say that about what I said as well. It's from a womanist perspective, I as a Black woman, I chose to focus on the Black mayors primarily, and Stacey Abrams and Kamala Harris, because they have taken hits, significant hits from the president, impacting their lives and the lives of people they serve. And that's what I chose to focus on. Now, as it relates to grassroots, and is that, a hierarchy in terms of, what actually impacts change. As a grassroots activist, I will continue to be a grassroots activist. And I can be a grassroots activist without engaging in whose work is more impactful than another's. I don't want to diminish our elected officials by saying that my work is more impactful than their work. I personally don't have the power to call the National Guard, right? I don't have the personal power or the political power to call off the Guard. I don't have the stage to tell any elected official, I have 2 words for you, and have it matter, right? So my whole thing is we all need to better understand what we can do do it, and support each other in each other's work.
Thank you for that. The next question is one that's near and dear to my heart. The relationship between feminist and womanist. How do you conceptualize those two, and why womanist for this justice making framework specifically?
So it's been my understanding that, and maybe some people have experienced this, that there was and continues to be racism within feminist communities, feminist thought, feminists themselves, feminist movements. And that racism has been experienced as invisibilization, right? It's like, we know you're here as a woman, but we don't have an interest in how the intersectionalities of your experiences as Black women. We're not interested in that. But yeah, please support us on, feminist principles, what have you. So Black women felt that and said, okay, we have something to offer too, and let us get together and figure out how we're going to articulate that. And so womanist thought was born. And then as it relates to justice making, well, Black people, and I'm gonna put in there any quote unquote minoritized group of people in the United States, our well-being is largely connected to how justice systems work, right? So we have to be very, very attuned to our justice systems, because they crush us when they are out of sync, which they are, and we are getting crushed.
I have another question, sort of more along the lines of sort of the Buddhist framework that you're working under, and this is, I've had experience when dealing with so-called identity politics, sort of identifying myself as a Black woman who moves through a white supremacist world in mostly, let's say, white Buddhist communities. I've had people critique that idea, right? And say that, and you get to this too in your recent essay in the Black and Buddhist anthology that you edited, right? Like, so I've had white Buddhists say to me, they take up the Buddhist claim of no self, right? That that is, a key philosophy or value in Buddhism. And so the minute that we talk about the body, various identities that we have, we're getting trapped and we're perpetuating suffering. Of course, I have my own responses to that, but I would just really love to hear yours. Yeah.
Okay. In all bluntness, I don't really want to talk about that. They can have their own views. No, seriously. I see someone say, great question, but not for me. That's what you want to do. Go ahead and try to transcend white privilege by, dwelling in the concept of no self. See how that works. The question.
Yes, fair enough.
Right. I see. Really, the real question is, why are you imposing that on me? What's in that for you?
I mean, I just think that it's interesting as I go along my own journey, right? This is all about, all my questions are like, rooted in my own experience and my own journey. A few of my recent teachers have also pointed to, in the West, the way that Buddhism has been practiced so far, let's say, yes, in a lot of white communities, is there's not a big focus on ethics. You know, there's not a big justice focus in terms of like societal justice.
Mhm.
There's more of a focus on, okay, sitting down and meditating and, you know, yoga and Dharma talks and whatnot. And, you know, that makes a lot of sense given our individualistic Western American culture. But I wonder if you can talk about, you know, from your own point of view, what are the stakes of all of us embracing sort of like the ethical dimensions of Buddhist spiritual life?
Mhm. All of us, meaning all Buddhist practitioners or all people?
I guess I'm asking Buddhist practitioners right now.
Okay, all right. Well, I would hope that the ethical teachings are actually embedded in the practices, right? I think it's the denial of how to respond to the suffering that we see that gets twisted up in fear. Yeah, gets twisted up in fear. So mindfulness, to be aware of oneself, uh, I would argue, is an ethical practice, because by paying attention to oneself and getting good at that, then you can notice when for example, the urges or impulses to be aggressive are rising in the moment, and you can, with a good deep breath, maybe a walk, or maybe just naming it, right? I'm angry, or I want to hurt somebody, that you don't actually do it, right? So embedded in the practices, I think, are ethics. But as it comes to justice and justice making, those are two different things, right? And I think that we have to, I'll put it this way. We cannot look to Buddhist teachings to teach us about justice, because it's just not there. It really isn't there. The teachings that Dharma teachers offer, it might be there. But when I say looking at Buddhist text, I mean, these texts come from, 2,600 years ago, 1,200 years ago, in their particular context. They have nothing to do with the experience of African descended people in the West. Nothing. So why would you place Buddhist teachings over your own lived experience of being a Black person? What's happening there? Dolores Williams, who's a womanist theologian, said in her book that she was concerned about Black people losing their Afrocentric consciousness when they engage in practices that are not of the African American experience, right? And so I really thought about that. Does Buddhism, when Black people enter it, do we lose something? Or better yet, do we give something away about our lived experience, about how to survive? Do we lose the sense of danger, right? And if we do, I would say, come out, snap out of it, snap out of it, right? We can reclaim the wisdom of our ancestors and hold as true our experiences of living in this country right now, and say, you know what, I don't have time to dilly-dally with the philosophy of whether I exist or not. I know I exist, and I intend to continue existing as long as I can, for the well-being of myself, my family, what have you. And so this is what I'm going to do in order to do that. And I say, as members of oppressed communities, I believe it is a spiritual decision to decide to act in ways of self-preservation rather than self-negation.
Thank you, Ayo. I'm going to leave it there and hopefully let other people engage.
Thank you.
So,
Celebrating bluntness.
So yeah, thank you for those comments and those tough questions and those